Well, we've got more news on the Russian collusion hoax front, and Kristen Welker just couldn't handle it. She can't handle the fact that her hero, Barack Obama, suddenly is starting to get a little muddied up, a little scuffed up in his reputation, because all roads lead to him at the very top of the pyramid of this horrific American scandal, worse than Watergate. And things are starting to get very serious in Washington, D.C. I want to show you what Kristen Welker did. She literally got shrill in her voice when she was interviewing a Republican senator. We'll show that to you in a minute. But first, Maria Bartiromo yesterday had some breaking news from CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Let's take a look at this. There's a lot to unpack here. I will be interrupting this a couple of times, just be forewarned. Take a look.
Look, our audience knows this, thanks to you and thanks to Devin Nunes. Our audience is well aware of what took place here, but we want to see accountability. Many of the statute of limitations have expired. It's been almost 10 years for many of these folks who did this. But John Brennan testified to Congress, and so did Hillary Clinton, within 5 years. I think it was in 2020, right, and then again in 2021. Are those statute of limitations still live? Tell me if, in fact, we could see a criminal prosecution here, as you just the other day, 3 weeks ago, have, in fact, referred criminal referrals to the DOJ.
Well, Maria, so part of what came out last week was about how John Brennan, Clapper, Comey, they all pushed the known fake Steele dossier into intelligence community assessments and as the basis for Crossfire Hurricane and all that. But what hasn't come out yet, and what's going to come out, is the underlying intelligence that I have spent the last few months making recommendations about final declassification and sent that to the Department of Justice that will come out in the John Durham report classified annex. And what that intelligence shows, Maria, is that part of this was a Hillary Clinton plan, but part of it was an FBI plan to be an accelerant to that fake Steele dossier, to those fake Russia collusion claims, by pouring oil on the fire, by amplifying the lie and burying the truth of what Hillary Clinton was up to. And you're right, Maria. John Brennan testified to John Durham in August of 2020. He also testified to the House Oversight Committee in 2022. Hillary Clinton testified before John Durham under oath in 2022. James Comey testified before the Senate committee in September 2020. All of that's within the last 5 years. And much of that testimony is, frankly, completely inconsistent with what our underlying intelligence that is about to be declassified in the Durham Annex, what that reflects.
All right, that's CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Let me just, I want to summarize what you just heard. Mr. Durham was the special prosecutor. Robert Durham was the special prosecutor. He was a U.S. attorney. He had all powers of a U.S. attorney special counsel in interviewing all of the players in the Russian collusion hoax. That means Hillary, it means James Comey, Brennan, Clapper, all of them except Barack Obama. If they lied to a U.S. attorney working on behalf of the Department of Justice during any of those interviews, they can be prosecuted. And what CIA Director Ratcliffe just said is, we're going to be declassifying a whole tranche of documents related to the Durham investigation that has been classified and kept from the American people. And as he just said, a lot of that testimony, what was the artful way he put it? Hang on, I want you to hear his words.
Before the Senate committee in September 2020, all of that's within the last 5 years. And much of that testimony is, frankly, completely inconsistent with what our underlying intelligence that is about to be declassified in the Durham Annex, what that reflects.
Yeah, their testimony is inconsistent with the intelligence. They lied. They lied. They perjured themselves, is what he's saying. Now, he's the head of the CIA. He's not in charge of law enforcement. He's not in charge of bringing charges. He's not in charge of that aspect of it. All he does is provide the evidence and intelligence, which is how it's supposed to work, which, by the way, is part of the problem with how things happened under Obama with regard to Russian collusion, where instead the president came up with a conclusion and then said to Brennan and Clapper and Comey, go find some intelligence that backs up this conclusion. Right? And understand, as this gets so clouded and convoluted, and if you haven't watched our other segments on this, please do so. But let me summarize it for you. They decided that Russia successfully interfered with the election in 2016, and they did it because they favored Donald Trump and they wanted him to win. And then Obama took that as the conclusion and said to Comey and Clapper and Brennan, go set up a report that has some intelligence in it that backs up the conclusion that I just told you I want you to get. And that's what they did. And that's a violation of the law. It's a weaponization of the intelligence community. Imagine the CIA and the FBI and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence scheming to tell lies publicly about you, about any innocent American. And then imagine that that innocent American just got elected president and he was assembling his government and he was about to take over. There's a law on the books. It's called conspiracy to deny an individual his civil rights. And that includes the civil right to carry out and execute the position that you've been elected to do in the government. They did that to Donald Trump. They impeded his ability to carry out his job as president by conspiring here. That's the law they broke, a major law. They keep calling it a conspiracy theory. No, it's a conspiracy fact. It was literally a conspiracy. All right, so that's what Radcliffe is releasing here. We're going to be unclassifying these things, and the intelligence is at odds with the testimony, and all of that testimony that he just laid out was within a 5-year window, which means it is eligible for prosecution. Okay, more.
And so, you know, Pam Bondi does have a strike force. It is a different Department of Justice, a different FBI, and an opportunity to look at how these people really did conspire to run a hoax, a fraud on the American people and against Donald Trump's presidency. And so coming forward, we understand that they did this, but now we need to understand how they did this. And I think that's why you see the left losing their minds over this, Maria, saying, why are you spending time? This is vindictive. You're going back. This is Donald Trump, you know, seeking retribution. It's not. Donald Trump's election by the American people was a statement, Maria. They said to everyone, we know what you did to Donald Trump, and we reelected him because we know this was all fake. We know it was a hoax. Now we want to understand how you did it so that it can't happen again. And that's what this declassification process that we're undergoing right now, what's going on, why it's so important, and why there can be accountability and preventability to prevent these same people that did it in 2016 with the Steele dossier, with the Hunter Biden laptop in 2020 from doing it again in the future.
And let me just add to that, because the Steele dossier, Russian collusion hoax, and the Hunter Biden laptop. But there's one more thing in there that's really important, and that is the Mar-a-Lago raid. The Mar-a-Lago raid, I believe the investigation is focusing on that because Donald Trump had a huge tranche of executive paperwork and documents, and that included documents that played into and backed up much of what went on during the Russian collusion hoax and the Crossfire Hurricane investigation into Donald Trump and people around Donald Trump. If they can prove or contend that the Mar-a-Lago raid was in part to acquire documents that were in Donald Trump's possession that related back to that, that expands the conspiracy to impede justice and to obstruct justice by keeping Trump from seeing that and keeping an investigation from having evidence. Not only does that extend the statute of limitations, but it also means that a grand jury can be impaneled in Florida, not in Washington, D.C., in Florida, to determine whether any criminal charges should be brought. Keep that in mind. Just keep that in the back of your head as this continues to play out. All right, a little bit more with Maria and John Ratcliffe.
So what I think I hear you saying is there is still an opportunity for indictments, potential prosecutions, accountability from those people who may have lied under oath, like John Brennan, James Comey, and perhaps Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's why I've made the referrals that I have. DNI Gabbard has made referrals, and why we're going to continue to share the intelligence that would support the ability of our Department of Justice to make fair and just, bring fair and just claims against those who have perpetrated this hoax against the American people and this stain on our country.
Director, one other question on this. Tulsi, as well as President Trump, used the word treason. Is there a statute of limitations on treason?
Well, Maria, what I would say is this, is there is no doubt in my mind that the people that we just talked about conspired. They conspired against President Trump. They conspired against the American people. And so I'll leave it to Pam Bondi and our Department of Justice, Kash Patel, and our FBI to investigate the conspiracy to do what and what charges that they're capable of bringing. But again, I don't think statute of limitations are going to impact, because in a conspiracy, Maria, the statute of limitation doesn't start to run until the last act in furtherance of that conspiracy. And Maria, part of why this is so important is the people behind this are still furthering the conspiracy. They're refusing to admit or acknowledge what they did in 2016 and what they did in 2020 was wrong. And so I think that's why this is so important and why I'm excited about what the American people will see very shortly and what's to continue to come.
Well, there you go. Conspiracy. As I just said, it's a conspiracy. And he said conspiracy to do what? We'll leave that up to Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. My hunch, as I'm telling you now, write it down, is that it's a conspiracy to violate Donald Trump's civil rights. And real fast, because I looked this up earlier, I want to tell you what statute that is in particular. It is, sorry, doing this in real time, and I should have been prepared for you. It is 42 U.S. Code 1985. 42 U.S. Code 1985. 42 U.S. Code 1985. Conspiracy to interfere with civil rights. What does that mean? Preventing an officer from performing duties. If two or more persons in any state or territory conspire to prevent by force, intimidation, or threat any person from accepting or holding any office, trust, or place of confidence under the United States, or from discharging any duties thereof, or to induce by like means any officer of the United States to leave any state, district, or place where his duties as an officer are required to be performed, or to injure him in his person or property on account of his lawful discharge of the duties of his office, or while engaged in the lawful discharge thereof. Sound familiar? Does it sound like they were trying to prevent, by intimidation or threat, Donald Trump from discharging the duties of his office? Sure does to me. Just keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, that's what was happening on Fox News Sunday morning. Over on NBC News, it was a different story. Kristen Welker is absolutely hysterical and going after Lindsey Graham, of all people. Lindsey Graham saying, you know, we're learning a lot here about what happened on this Russian collusion thing, and it sure looks like the whole thing was trumped up. It sure looks like John Brennan and James Comey and James Clapper were told to come up with this intelligence community assessment, and they told us at the time that they weren't using the Steele dossier, but they did. And whatever scant evidence they had to back up their conclusion was complete and total crap. They were even told that the intelligence was crap by career professionals in the intelligence community. But Kristen Welker, nope. She's got to protect Obama at all costs. Watch this.
Senator, as you know, former President Obama has weighed in through a spokesperson. He says that's just patently false. I actually spoke to Susan Miller, who's a former senior CIA officer who helped oversee the 2017 intelligence assessment on Russian interference. She says it's completely false that Obama or anyone else asked them to change or sway their investigation. She says they all, she says, and she's a Republican, says they all would have quit if that had happened. Senator, are you trying to rewrite history to distract from the Epstein matter, Senator?
No. I love, so if you're like me, you're watching this, right? And Kristen Welker is just giving a speech. And you're thinking, where's the question here? Where's the question? She's giving a speech. Obama denies that. And there was a Republican in the intelligence community, and she has denied it as well. And Lindsey Graham's like, well, of course, what do you expect them to say? And so because they denied it, I guess that means that it must be true, which is an incredible position for a journalist to take. So I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, so where's the question? Is there a question here? And the question is, aren't you really just distracting from the Epstein story? Oh my God, they're precious, aren't they? I love that they've just discovered the Epstein story. And the only reason that any of this is being brought up now is to distract from the Epstein story. Okay, Kirsten, that's not even the high point of this interview. It comes right at the end of this exchange. I'll show it to you. Watch.
I'm trying to let you know and the media know that we found something we didn't know before. At the end of the day, I'm not calling for a prosecution against President Obama for treason, but I am calling for an investigation. Mr. Miller also said there was no credible evidence that President Trump colluded with the Russians. For years and months and days and weeks, people had their lives turned upside down, chasing the Mueller narrative that Trump was in bed with the Russians, that the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians. The only people colluding with the Russians were the Hillary Clinton campaign, and Christopher Steele manufacturing a document to get warrants against Carter Page based on lies and falsehoods. So, yeah, I'm very familiar with it. What you don't seem to acknowledge is there's something new being found. Rather than reinventing the wheel here, let's go back to a special counsel model to look at this something new. The something new is statements by President Obama. I don't like your analysis. Russia wasn't involved here in 2016.
Senator, you're saying there's something new. This report goes back to 2020. It's 5 years old. There's actually nothing new in this report and nothing that changes any conclusion. But I want to talk about Gaza.
Turned over is new to me.
Senator,
it's new to me.
But Senator,
you're trying to sweep this stuff under the rug, and that's not right.
That's exactly what she's doing. But I just want to repeat that one more time because it's just a quintessential Kristen Welker left-wing legacy media tactic here that is amazing. Watch. I'm going to interrupt now because I try not to if I can help it.
Something new is statements by President Obama. I don't like your analysis. Russia wasn't involved here in 2016.
Look at how she's dying to get in there. You heard her constantly trying to interject. Oh, she can't wait to get in. Oh, she can't stand that he's able to say this on her show. She's got to interrupt. Stop this. Stop saying things that I don't like. I don't want my viewers. My viewers are going to be mad at me because they love our peacock. It's NBC News after all.
You're saying there's something new. This report goes back to 2020.
Yes, but it's now just been declassified, you moron. Oh, but that's an old report. Yeah, but it was buried. We weren't allowed to see it, idiot. This isn't new. It's 5 years old. The news, oh my God, it's so amazing to me how many people who call themselves, journalists and reporters, people who literally work in the news. That's NBC News, right? It's news, NBC News. How they don't understand what news is. This is an old report. It's like if in the JFK files that just got declassified, they got a smoking gun document that says, well, would you look at that? Bozo the Clown was on the grassy knoll and he was the second shooter. The Kristen Welker would look at that and say, well, that's not news. That's 60 years old. You idiot. God. You're right. The report is from 2020, but it was buried and declassified and kept from the American people. And now we see it, and you better believe it's news. But then there's that. Look at her face. But then she says, this isn't news. This is an old document. But this is my favorite part of this whole exchange, is that she gives the monologue because she's not in the news business. Understand something. When she approaches her job at Meet the Press, she didn't think to herself, okay, I'm going to do a segment with Lindsey Graham, and he's a newsmaker, and he's got opinions about this thing. So I'm going to challenge him and ask him some questions. I'm going to find out what he has to say, and then we're going to move on to my other segment. You see, that's what an interviewer does. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to follow up. I might challenge you on some of those things, but ultimately the whole point of the segment is to find out what this senator has to say about this issue. No. Kristen Welker wants to defeat him. She's trying to debate him. She's trying to win an argument against him. And I'll prove it to you. Because this whole statement that she's making, this isn't new. This is from 2020. This is old. It's not a question. She's saying all of this, and then she says, but let's move on to another topic. Wait, what are you talking about? So in other words, I want to make the final argument. I want to have the last word. I want to show you up. I want to win the debate. And then since I control the conversation because it's my show, we will now move on to the next topic. That proves to you that she's not interviewing this guy. She wants to win a debate with this guy. Watch.
Involved here in 2016.
Senator, you're saying there's something new. This report goes back to 2020. It's 5 years old. There's actually nothing new in this report and nothing that changes any conclusion. But I want to talk about Gaza.
Over.
You see? But I want to talk about Gaza. Senator, you say there's nothing new, but it's you said it's new, but it's all old. There's nothing new here. It doesn't change anything. So we're done with this conversation now. Let's talk about Gaza. That's not an interviewer. That's not someone trying to get information for the viewers. That's someone trying to win a debate, which is great. Change this from Meet the Press to Meet the Debaters. Maybe even Meet the Master Debaters. Meanwhile, back on Fox News, Devin Nunes, who is the chairman of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, he's the one with his chief counsel back then, Kash Patel, in 2017, started to unravel this whole lie of Russian collusion. He was the first person to figure out what a grand conspiracy this was. He had plenty to say as well.
The investigations in 17 and 18 and 19 and 20, he never said that, oh, yeah, I had told Obama and these people about the Clinton, the Steele dossier and all of
that Clinton was coming out with a new story that Trump colluded with Russia.
Right. That happened in August of 16. He had a lot to say, but one of the things he didn't have to say was that he knew that this was a Clinton hoax. It wasn't until John Ratcliffe becomes the head of the DNI, he digs that up, he finds these handwritten notes where Brennan himself, and I'm sure if he wrote it down, he must have remembered. It's kind of an important point to remember that if one of the presidential candidates is cooking up a scheme, working with Russia and working with Russians to cook up this scheme. And then what you found out now from the report that we put out this week is also that the Russians knew about the scheme. So the only people that didn't know about the scheme were President Trump and the Republicans. We're the only ones that didn't know about a lot of this, and now we're digging this up.
That's right. And let me just reiterate what was just said there. And this has been lost in the shuffle for some reason, because everyone's saying, John Brennan, he's the one who claimed that he didn't use the Steele dossier, and then it turns out he did use the Steele dossier, but he thought it was no. John Brennan knew of the Steele dossier and the fact that the Clinton campaign was trying to slime Donald Trump as being in bed with the Russians. He knew about this months before Election Day. He briefed Barack Obama about it. Obama and Brennan knew that it was a Hillary Clinton campaign tactic, an opposition research tactic to deflect from the intense scrutiny of Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server instead of the government email server when she was Secretary of State. She had to change the subject. So they came up with the Russian collusion hoax. They paid millions of dollars to Christopher Steele, a former MI6 agent, to create this thing that they knew from the beginning was fake. They knew that it was paid for by Hillary. And so then when Barack Obama said, go and support this claim that Trump was helped by the Russians, and it was because they supported his candidacy, they knew it was fake from the beginning. They manufactured this. And that gets lost in the equation. Understand this. Because he just pointed out, Hillary knew it was fake. Obviously, she paid for it. Obama knew that it was fake. John Brennan knew that it was fake. James Comey knew that it was fake. James Clapper knew that it was fake. They all knew that it was fake. And then a month after Trump won the election, they said, create this assessment that shows the Russians interfered successfully with the election and that they did it to help Donald Trump, even though they knew that was not true. And then they found intelligence that was fake and fraudulent, including the Steele dossier that they knew was fake, to support that. But understand something here, because that's important to know, because that's the crux of this conspiracy. That's the crux of it. But one last item here. The director of the CIA intercepted intelligence that showed that the Russians knew about this fake dossier, and that John Brennan obviously knew that Hillary Clinton had created this thing for opposition research. And as the director of the CIA, informing the president of the United States in the middle of a presidential election, at no time during any moment of the summer and early fall of 2016, leading up to Election Day, did anyone working for the Obama administration say, hey, we should maybe let the Trump campaign know about this? Right? We hear about it all the time. Oh, it was the Obama administration did everything by the book. They followed every rule. They didn't do anything that was improper or out of line. Everything was done. They were just following the evidence. And they may have gotten it wrong, but you can't blame them. There was no conspiracy to hurt Donald Trump. If that's so, then why didn't they pick up the phone and say, hey, you guys should know about this? Right? Because they're not the campaign. They're not the Democratic National Committee. They're the White House. They're the CIA. They're the FBI. They're the Justice Department. They're the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. They knew that there were shenanigans going on. They knew the Russians knew that there were shenanigans going on. They knew that there was a fake thing being floated out that Hillary had paid for. And they never once, in their responsible role as members of the intelligence community, supposedly protecting our country from nefarious actors, they never once picked up the phone and notified the Trump campaign that they knew this was going on. Why not? You would think they would, but they didn't. Why not? You know the answer. We'll keep following this story. We'll follow it for you. And no one else is really doing it the way we're doing it. We're okay with that because hopefully it keeps you coming back for more.